Imagine living in a village where it didn't matter who arrived first. If the shining path came, you were accused of helping the government. If the army came, you were accused of helping the shining path. Either way, someone in your family might not survive the night. Tonight, we're going to talk about one of the darkest chapters in Latin American history, the rise of Peru's shining path. Welcome to the podcast, You Can't Unhear. Peru in the 1970s was a country divided. While cities continued to grow, entire communities hidden deep within the Andes remained forgotten. Many indigenous families lived without reliable education, healthcare, or even meaningful government support. For decades, they had been promised change, but very little arrived. Into that frustration stepped a university philosophy professor, Abimael Guzmán. He believed Peru could only be saved through violent revolution. Guzmán saw himself as leading the second wave of Maoism, trying to recreate what he'd witnessed during his visits to China's Cultural Revolution. The thing is, while he thought of himself as a great Marxist thinker, his ideology was actually pretty shallow, full of simple clichés and lacking the depth you'd find in actual Lenin or Maoist political philosophy. Guzmán argued that elections, compromise, and reform were meaningless. The old system had to be destroyed completely. By the late 1960s, he had formed a movement known as Sendero Luminoso, better known around the world as the Shining Path. Their worldview was black and white. The existing state couldn't be reformed because it was fundamentally corrupt and tied to global systems of exploitation. The only solution was complete destruction, followed by building a new society based on their revolutionary principles. Violence wasn't a last resort for them. It was an essential component of transformation, completely justifiable in their minds. The Shining Path saw violence not as a tool, but as a necessity. Anyone who disagreed became an enemy. Village leaders, teachers, trade union organizers, religious workers, even farmers who simply refused to cooperate. If they stood outside the movement, they could become targets. Throughout the 1970s, the organization quietly expanded across Peru's poorest rural regions, building secret cells, recruiting students. By the late 1970s, they'd organized themselves into a disciplined revolutionary force, preparing to launch a violent insurgency to overthrow the Peruvian government. They built up their power base by pushing out and killing exploitative landowners, NGOs working to improve life, and Catholic missionaries from rural areas. The armed conflict began in 1980. Ironically, the same year Peru transitioned back to democratic governance after 12 years of military rule. For many citizens, this represented hope for political participation and reform through institutions. But for the Shining Path, it was the perfect opportunity to launch their revolutionary project. They burned ballot boxes. It was their declaration that bullets would replace ballots, a symbolic rejection of the electoral process. Soon, power stations were bombed, bridges destroyed, and entire communities found themselves under the group's control. Meanwhile, the Peruvian government didn't really respond until 1983, when they finally deployed troops to Shining Path-controlled regions. But these responses were poorly coordinated. The soldiers had limited training in guerrilla warfare and little knowledge about the local populations they were supposed to protect. Many were just teenagers thrust into this disturbing conflict. As suspicion spread, security forces frequently treated entire communities as potential Shining Path collaborators, leading to widespread abuses that mirrored the brutality of the people they were fighting. Arbitrary detentions became common. Torture of captured Shining Path members was basically guaranteed. Random stops in the countryside meant anyone without ID papers was treated as a Shining Path member and taken for interrogation. Even just looking like you might be a member was enough for detention. Thousands of women were detained and faced repeated sexual assault by Peruvian soldiers. Disappearances became one of the most feared aspects of the conflict. People taken into custody were often never seen again, leaving families without answers and communities in constant uncertainty. They also engaged in mass abductions of the Ashaninka people, indigenous to parts of the Amazonian rainforest. These people were forced into fighting or working for the path. As many as 6,000 people, more than 10% of the group's estimated population of 55,000, were killed, and around 40 communities were destroyed entirely. Ashaninka women were subjected to sexual assault in attempts to breed more soldiers for the Shining Path. This deliberate targeting has led some to label these particular crimes against humanity. One of the Shining Path's most horrifying tactics was the public execution of community leaders. Victims were often dragged before so-called people's trials. The verdict had already been decided. The executions weren't only meant to kill. They were meant to send a message. Fear became their greatest weapon. Entire communities learned that resistance came with unimaginable consequences. The violence soon spread beyond the Andes. By the late 1980s, bombings reached Lima. Markets, business districts, and public spaces became targets. One of the deadliest attacks, the Tarata bombing, killed dozens of civilians and injured hundreds more. The war had reached Peru's capital. No one felt safe anymore. Yet, even during the darkest years, some people refused to stay silent. One of them was Maria Elena Moyano, a community leader. She organized food programs, supported women, and openly condemned the Shining Path's violence. While many feared speaking publicly, she continued to challenge them. Her courage made her a symbol of resistance, but it also made her a target. Eventually, the Shining Path assassinated her, hoping her death would silence others. Instead, she became one of Peru's most enduring symbols of defiance. By the early 1990s, years of intelligence work finally led authorities to Abimael Guzmán. Without firing a shot, he was captured inside a safe house in Lima. The arrest marked the beginning of the end for the movement. Although smaller factions survived, the Shining Path never regained the power it once held. Today, the conflict remains one of Peru's deepest national scars. An estimated 70,000 people lost their lives during the internal conflict, with civilians making up the overwhelming majority. Many villages still carry memories of neighbors who disappeared, families who never returned, and children who grew up surrounded by violence. The Shining Path claimed they were building a better future. Instead, they left behind decades of grief, fear, and irreversible loss. Sometimes, the most dangerous people aren't those who promise destruction. They're the ones who promise salvation at any cost. And once that belief becomes absolute, everyone else becomes expendable. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, Don't forget to subscribe, because this week, we're going to cover more stories about some of the world's most dangerous cults. I'll see you on the next episode of the podcast You Can't Unhear.